I used to imagine the moment he'd propose 1,000 different ways, under fireworks on the beach, maybe somewhere quiet where words felt heavier. But I never imagined it would begin with silence. Not the romantic kind, not the peaceful kind, the kind that traps you in your own heartbeat. Because when he gently reached behind my ear, smiled, and slid off my hearing aid, he thought he was creating the perfect moment. He thought I wouldn't hear him getting down on one knee, fumbling nervously, whispering my name in that trembling way he does when he's nervous. What he didn't know was that my hearing had come back just a week earlier. It happened suddenly. The healing, I mean, after nearly 4 years of partial deafness, after every appointment and every failed treatment, something shifted. I woke up one morning and heard birds outside my window again. I cried quietly, scared to believe it was real. The doctor said it was rare but possible. A natural recovery, the nerves reawakening. I hadn't told anyone yet. Not my friends. Not my parents. Not even him. I wanted to hold it for a while. To live in the quiet miracle by myself before the world filled it with noise and questions. He'd always been good to me, at least in ways people could see. He learned sign language when I lost my hearing. He carried extra batteries in his bag just in case mine died. He'd order food for me at restaurants, make sure I understood what waiters were saying. To everyone else, he was the perfect boyfriend. Patient, supportive, selfless. But when you lose one sense, your others sharpen. I'd started noticing things long before I got my hearing back. The way his smile didn't reach his eyes when I spoke. The subtle impatience in his hands when I signed too slowly. The way he'd talk about me like I was a fragile project. Not a person. I ignored it for a long time. Because when you live in silence, you start clinging to anything that feels safe. Even pity disguised as love. I told myself I was lucky. That no one else would stay. That this man was my anchor. Even if sometimes he felt like the chain too. So when he led me out to the garden that night, candles flickering, soft music playing through the speaker, I followed him willingly. The night smelled of jasmine and rain. He was nervous, I could tell. His hands were shaking slightly as he guided me toward the fountain. He looked at me like I was something breakable and precious, and for a moment, I wanted to believe I still was. Then he did it, that tender motion, reaching behind my ear, removing the small silver hearing aid, setting it carefully on the table beside the candles. "You don't need this right now," he whispered. I could hear every word, every nervous breath, every tremble in his voice. But he didn't know that. He thought I was standing there in silence, smiling because I trusted him completely. And as he bent down, reaching for something in his pocket, something inside me cracked open. I realized this wasn't just about the proposal, it was about power, about how he always wanted to control the narrative, to be the savior, the hero in my story, the man who gave meaning to my silence. For months, I told myself I was ready to marry him. But as I stood there, surrounded by flickering light and carefully orchestrated romance, all I could hear were echoes. All the little moments when he'd spoken over me, decided things for me, loved me loudly but never listened quietly. He didn't know I could hear the music. He didn't know I could hear the soft rustle of his jacket or the whispered laugh of his friends hiding behind the fence, ready to record the moment on camera. He didn't know I heard him rehearsing earlier in the car, muttering the lines like an actor before a play. It was supposed to be perfect, but perfection has always scared me, because it usually hides something ugly underneath, so I stood still. Let him talk. Let him pour his heart out, thinking I couldn't hear a word. But I did. Every word, every secret, every lie wrapped in love, and when he finally opened the box, holding up the ring, waiting for my reaction, I didn't move. I just looked at him, my heart beating louder than the music. He thought my silence was emotion. He smiled, relieved, confident. But the silence wasn't love anymore. It was clarity. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. It wasn't that I didn't love him. It was that I didn't recognize myself anymore in the way he loved me. The night air thickened around us as he stayed kneeling, his eyes glassy with rehearsed devotion. I could hear his friends whispering in the bushes, their phones recording every second. They were waiting for the perfect reaction, the tearful nod, the overjoyed silence of the disabled girlfriend who found her happy ending. He wanted that moment captured. The perfect man proposing to the woman he stood by through her hardship. The man who never gave up on her. But as he spoke, I realized this moment wasn't for me. It was for them, for the world, for the version of himself he wanted people to see. His words sounded hollow, practiced. Every sentence carefully crafted for sympathy. He wasn't proposing to me. He was proposing to an image, to the fragile, quiet girl he'd built in his head, the girl who needed him, the one who couldn't hear him lying. He told me how I'd changed his life, how he wanted to protect me forever. I could hear the pride in his voice when he said it, the kind that didn't sound like love, but ownership. My stomach twisted. I realized I wasn't trembling because I was emotional. I was trembling because I finally understood. Every sweet gesture, every soft word, every protective act had come with invisible strings. I was his proof of goodness, his charity, his story to tell. As he waited for my reaction, I heard something else. A faint buzz from his phone lying on the table beside the candles. A notification pinged, sharp in the silence. Another ping, then another. I couldn't help it. My eyes flicked toward the screen. It was a message preview, a name I didn't recognize, followed by a heart emoji and the words, "Did you tell her yet?" My heart sank. He didn't notice I was looking. He thought I was still lost in silence, still playing my role. But I was hearing everything now, not just the sounds around me, but the meaning behind them. I knew that name. Not the person, but the tone. I'd heard him mention a co-worker from the new project, always in passing, always casual. I'd believed him because belief was easier than suspicion. The irony burned. For months, he'd insisted on controlling my world. The lights, the words, the way I moved through every soundless room. And now, here he was, letting the truth slip out in the smallest vibration. The world seemed to slow down. The candles flickered harder. He said my name again, softer this time, like he was trying to pull me back into the story he'd written. But I was already outside it. I could hear the faint murmur of his friends growing restless, someone whispering if it was time to come out and cheer. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to tell them all that this wasn't love, that it was a performance. But I stayed quiet. I let the silence do the talking. He stood up slowly, reaching for my hand. I didn't move. He smiled awkwardly, trying to read my expression. He thought maybe I was overwhelmed, that I was touched, that the silence was romantic. It wasn't. It was grief. Grief for the version of me that once thought his love was enough. When he finally realized I wasn't reacting, confusion flickered across his face. I could almost hear his mind scrambling for answers. He said my name again, a little louder, as if I'd somehow forgotten my condition. Then gently he reached to put the hearing aid back on. I let him. For one reason only, because I wanted him to hear what silence sounded like when it belonged to me. The moment it clicked back on, he spoke softly. But before he could finish, I interrupted, my voice sharp, trembling but clear. For the first time in years, I spoke without fear. I told him the truth, that I could hear him, that I'd been able to for a week, that I'd heard every word he said, every whisper he thought I couldn't hear. And for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Not because I'd caught him lying, but because I'd taken back the silence he'd used to control me. His friends froze behind the fence. I heard their phones lower, the whispering stop. He tried to speak, but his words stumbled out, all the rehearsed lines falling apart like broken glass. I told him about the message, about the name, about the lies I'd pieced together while pretending not to hear. And then I did something that surprised even me. I smiled. A real small, quiet smile. Not the kind that comes from joy, but from peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop begging someone to understand you. I picked up my hearing aid, placed it gently in my pocket, and turned to leave. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of a ring box closing, the sound of something ending. The night swallowed the rest of his words. I didn't need to hear them anymore. As I walked away, I realized that silence had never been my weakness. It had been my strength, because silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of self. And for the first time in years, the world wasn't quiet. It was mine. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, texts, notifications, one after another. At first, I didn't understand why. Then I saw the thumbnail, a blurry screenshot from the proposal night. My face caught mid-expression, not smiling, not crying, just frozen. The caption said, "Deaf girlfriend surprised with emotional proposal." His friends had uploaded it. They hadn't noticed my reaction. Or maybe they had, but edited around it to fit the story they wanted. The music swelled. The camera zoomed in. The captions described a beautiful moment of unconditional love. The video was spreading fast. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments. People were crying in the replies, calling him a saint, saying things like, "This is real love. Faith in humanity restored." My stomach twisted as I read them. Every line felt like a knife. They were praising a man who had lied to me, performed kindness like a play, and stripped away my voice, both literally and metaphorically. And I couldn't stop them. He had already messaged everyone, thanking them for the support, promising a wedding soon. He didn't even know I'd seen it yet. By noon, I turned off my phone. The noise was unbearable. My friends texted, confused, asking why I hadn't told them about the proposal. My mother called 3 times. I didn't answer. I just sat by the window, staring at the city below, the hum of traffic and distant music pouring through the open glass. It all sounded too alive, too sharp. The world was noisy again, but I felt completely numb. I thought about deleting everything, disappearing, running somewhere no one knew me. But the truth has a way of cornering you. You can't run from something that still beats inside your chest. I had spent years surviving in silence. This time, I refused to go quiet again, so I called him. His voice was cheerful when he picked up, like nothing had happened. He said he was so happy I finally said yes. That's when I realized something chilling. He truly believed I would come back, that I'd forgive him, fall into his arms, and play along for the cameras. He didn't hear me that night. Not really. He only heard the version of me he created. I told him to take down the video. I told him what he'd done was cruel, not just to me, but to everyone who believed his story. He laughed, awkwardly at first, then defensively. Said I was overreacting, that he just wanted to make something special. The kind of love story people dream about. That's when I understood. He didn't love me. He loved the idea of being loved by someone broken. It made him feel strong, kind, important. My silence had been his validation. My recovery, my hearing, had stolen that power from him. When he refused to delete the video, I made my own. I sat in my small apartment, hair messy, eyes tired, no makeup, no filters, just me and the truth. I explained everything. How I'd lost my hearing, how I'd regained it, how he took off my aid that night thinking I wouldn't hear his rehearsed words or the message from someone else. I told them I wasn't the symbol of silent love they wanted me to be. I was a woman who had been manipulated under the guise of devotion. When I posted it, I didn't expect anyone to care. But within hours, it spread faster than the original video. People started noticing the inconsistencies, the rehearsed tone, the performance in his voice. His friends quietly deleted the original. He turned off his comments. The sympathy shifted. Suddenly, people weren't crying tears of joy. They were angry, not just at him, but at the illusion. For a moment, I thought I'd feel vindicated. But I didn't. I just felt tired, because even now the world wasn't really listening to me. They were reacting, judging, dissecting. The story had escaped my hands again. I logged out, put my phone away, and went outside. The sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that make everything feel quieter. I walked to the park, the same one where I'd once sat in silence, feeling trapped. This time, I sat there hearing everything. The rustle of leaves, the sound of a child's laughter, the faint bark of a dog in the distance. Every sound felt like a reminder of what I'd almost lost forever. I realized then that my healing hadn't just been about my ears. It was about my boundaries, my right to choose who got to interpret my silence. I had spent so long letting people speak for me, fill my quiet with their assumptions. But now I could speak for myself, and I didn't owe anyone a perfect story. A week later, he texted me again, said he was sorry, said he'd messed up, but still wanted to make things right. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to fix. He wanted forgiveness without understanding, closure without consequence. I'd lived in that cycle long enough. Sometimes love doesn't end with anger. It ends with realization that someone was never meant to love the healed version of you, only the broken one they could control. That night, I took the hearing aid from my drawer, the same one he'd removed to silence me. I held it for a moment, then set it down on my windowsill, a relic of who I used to be. The next morning, the sun rose quietly, and for the first time, the world sounded like peace. It's been 3 months since that night. The video disappeared, his account went private, and the internet moved on, as it always does. But I didn't, not completely. Every once in a while, I still catch echoes of that night in my head. His voice, soft and rehearsed, his hand on my cheek, the sudden silence when he took away the hearing aid. The sound of betrayal is quiet. but it never fully fades. At first, I tried to erase everything. I deleted pictures, blocked mutual friends, avoided the cafe where we used to sit on rainy evenings. But healing isn't about erasing. It's about acknowledging. So I stopped running from the noise in my head and started listening to it instead. I began attending my therapy sessions again, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand the version of myself that had stayed silent for so long. My therapist asked me something that stuck. "When did you first learn that silence meant safety?" I didn't have an answer right away. But over time I realized it wasn't just him. It was everyone who ever mistook my quiet for acceptance, every time I smiled instead of speaking up, every moment I let peace replace truth. My hearing returned weeks before the proposal, but I had told no one. I wanted to experience the world again privately. The rain, the whisper of pages turning, the faint hum of a street musician at dusk, sounds I used to dream about. I wanted them for myself, not for performance. And maybe that's why I didn't tell him right away. I didn't want my healing to become his story. But he took it anyway. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never heard that message on his phone. Would I still have believed in his love? Would I still have smiled when he said he was lucky to have someone who listens with her heart? Maybe. And that's what scares me most. That love can sound so much like control when spoken softly enough. A few days ago, I ran into one of his friends at the grocery store. He looked surprised, almost guilty. He told me that my ex had moved away, started over somewhere new. "He's changed," he said, as if that was supposed to comfort me. I smiled politely, thanked him, and walked away. Maybe he had changed, maybe he hadn't. But I finally understood that his change didn't matter to me anymore. What mattered was that I had changed. Not in the way people online think, not some grand transformation or dramatic rebirth, but in quiet, subtle ways. I learned to stop explaining myself to those who never listened. I learned that healing isn't about getting back what you lost. It's about redefining what you deserve. Last week, I went to the ocean alone. I sat by the shore for hours, listening to the waves crash. Every roar, every whisper. There's something magical about hearing the sea for the first time again. It's unpredictable, chaotic, alive. It reminded me that silence doesn't mean emptiness. Sometimes it just means pause, reflection, peace. I took my hearing aid with me, held it in my hand, and finally let it go into the tide. Not out of anger or regret, but gratitude. That small piece of metal carried me through the quietest years of my life. It gave me patience, taught me resilience, and showed me how to listen to things beyond words. When I got home, I recorded one final video. Not for revenge, not for likes, not to prove anything. Just for me. I said, "To anyone who ever made you feel small because you were quiet, remember this. Silence isn't weakness. It's strength waiting for the right moment to speak." I didn't post it anywhere. I just saved it on my phone. A reminder. Now when I wake up each morning, I no longer fear the sound of my world. The city hums, birds sing, my kettle whistles, and I hear it all with peace instead of panic. Because I'm not scared of being heard anymore, or being misunderstood. I'm simply here, existing, alive in my own volume. And if you ask me what love sounds like now, I'd say it's not words or promises. It's the sound of your own voice. Steady, clear, and finally yours again.